Hi, and welcome to this explanation of neo-Marxism, the neo-Marxist view of social inequality. So, neo-Marxism means new type of Marxism. So we're talking about the 1960s, 1970s, when this view was first popular. The neo-Marxist view is influenced by two main perspectives as part of sociology. It's influenced by traditional Marxist concepts, which include concepts like social class, economic capital, exploitation, ideology. However, it also includes the influence of interactionist perspectives. Interactionism. Interactionism is part of the social action perspective, and it argues that human behaviour and action is a product of definitions and interpretations held by individuals and groups. In other words, human action and behaviour is a result of our consciousness and our interpretations about the world around us. Definitions and interpretations of the social world held by individuals and groups shape behaviour. The Marxist view is a structuralist, conflict view. It argues that social structures like economic, class, relationships confine and restrict behaviour. The social action theory and interactionism argues that human beings exchange symbols and use language and images, and labels are applied to each other by human beings. So this implies that culture and the way in which we define groups and define lifestyles and define what is important and worthwhile and what is normal and unacceptable, these also have an impact on status and identity, as well as the social structure of class and economic ownership. So you have the two sides, the structure view of Marxism, which looks at the economic structure primarily, but you also have the human agency side of social action theory of interactionism. Human agency or action based on definitions. Definitions are found in culture. So you have not only economic factors, but also cultural factors as part of neo-Marxist explanation. But also social factors are part of a neo-Marxist explanation. So economic factors, ownership, property, also occupation, income. Also cultural factors, definitions, norms, values, and also social factors, group membership, social connections, and social institutions. So they look beyond the economic factors of class, and they look also at cultural factors in terms of capital. According to Bordeaux, there are different types of capital. Okay, so Bourdieu talks about types of capital: cultural capital, social capital, and symbolic capital. So Bourdieu's analysis is neo-Marxist perspective because he goes beyond an economic explanation of class, and he says that the class system has become more complex. All of the neo-Marxists tend to acknowledge that the middle class has grown and it's become a permanent feature of society. So they talk about the changes to the class system in terms of class fragmentation, and they talk about how inequality is more complex. So the neo-Marxists look at the economic factors They look at the cultural and social factors in inequality. But what they argue is that the middle class has grown and that the potential for revolution by the working class seems to be undermined by the growth of the middle class, many of whom have come from the working class originally. So that social mobility has led to class fragmentation, where there's increasing blurring of the boundaries and divisions between groups. They're less coherent, are less clearly divided. And it's more complex because of the impact of cultural and social factors. For example, age, gender, and ethnicity can also have an impact on status in a way which can work in addition to social class economic factors. That can affect your status. So we look at the range of factors that can affect inequality beyond economic factors from a neo-Marxist perspective. We argue that there's class fragmentation. Bourdieu's idea of types of capital is that class groups are increasingly fragmented, and within each class fragment you may have different levels of economic capital, which is property and other resources that are material, physical resources, and other types of capital, capital meaning resources that can be used to accumulate further wealth. So cultural capital, attitudes, education, qualifications, knowledge, tastes, preferences. This could include the idea from Barry Sugarman that the working class are less able to exercise deferred gratification, which is the attitude you should sacrifice present pleasures for your future self. So focus on what you need for the future and don't indulge in pleasures now. The working class lack the ability to defer gratification because of their culture. So you could say that they lack cultural capital because they tend to have the attitude that you live in the moment. And that may mean messing around in class, not listening. It may mean hanging around with your friends in the corridor. It could mean someone buying food that they don't need instead of saving for their mortgage, or going out instead of staying in and doing homework. All of this can be seen as a present-oriented attitude, whereas the middle class is seen to have more cultural capital, which could include elements like knowledge of the arts, literature, tastefulness, what is considered tasteful, what is considered garish or tasteless, in terms of how to spend money, how to consume products and services. And it could include a sense of deferral of gratification, which means investing time now in work and career so that my future self can be rewarded in the future. So cultural capital is clearly linked to culture, attitudes, values, norms. Social capital, each group may have different levels of social capital, social connections and networks, relationships with other members of society and other groups and institutions. For example, members of the civil service may come from middle class backgrounds, be privately educated, being able to access contacts and networks within more middle class groups to further reinforce their status. Those coming from working class groups may lack social capital. They may not know people who can help their children with their homework, help their children access certain types of professions. This all affects your life chances and your opportunity to improve your life. Symbolic capital. Symbolic capital is to do with often physical, material symbols or images which promote a sense of professional competency. So, for example, a lawyer may drive a certain type of car to indicate that they're a competent, skilled lawyer. Someone might have a brass nameplate on their door to indicate that they're a skilled professional, like a doctor, with the names after their name to indicate that they've gained certain qualifications. These are symbols of professional competency. So with the concepts of economic, cultural, social and symbolic capital, this acknowledges that there's increasingly complex, fragmented class system. Someone who's a middle class teacher may lack economic capital but may have cultural capital. They may lack social capital and symbolic capital. A doctor might have a lot of the types of capital, but perhaps not as much economic capital as an owner of a business, who might have a range of the types of capital. We can see that it gets further fragmented when you look at the new categories within the class system. In terms of the working class, we've got the new working class and the old working class. This could be applied to any perspective, not just neo-Marxism. So new categories of class: new working class, service sector, old working class, industrial economy, jobs. Middle class, new middle class, teachers, social workers, growth in those areas, compared to old middle class, barristers, lawyers, doctors. Upper class, the new rich, who have less taste. David Beckham might be seen as less tasteful in his consumption, whereas the old rich is ascribed status, inherited wealth, people who spend their money on the right things and not in a garish way, which means perhaps conspicuously consuming just simply for the purpose of getting status. It's about having to prove your status. So you can see the difference between earning status and being ascribed status is the difference between possibly seeing your status as something you have to prove, compared to those who feel that they don't have anything to prove. So types of capital. Lastly, Eric Wright. Eric Wright talks about the concept of contradictory class locations. Contradictory class locations. So he argues that people in the middle class are often in contradictory class locations. So that means that they are, one at the same time, exploited by those above them in terms of the top owners and managers. But they may also be simultaneously controlling and exploiting those below them. So the idea of contradictory class locations indicates that they're in a contradictory position because they're exploited, but they're also exploiters. They are controlled, but they're also the controllers of others. So managers in Currys or in another typical store may be responsible for a number of staff, and they may have share ownership in the business, but they're also likely to be exploited and controlled by those above them. They may not have secure work. They may be earning a salary, so they don't have the same kind of security and economic stability compared to those who own above them. So you can see how they're in a contradictory position, with some aspects of the upper class and some aspects of the working class in their market situation and work conditions. So I hope this has helped explain neo-Marxism more. When you look specifically at other areas like crime, you also find this attempt to combine the analysis of structures and actions and agency to explain crime. But when looking at inequality, you can see that there's a combination of culture and structure and agency and social issues, groups, institutions, and that they're combined in a multidimensional approach. So that's neo-Marxism. If you have any questions, please email Daniel_Butcher@hotmail.co.uk.